You are listening to the It's Your Time podcast, and I'm your host, Certified Life Coach Michelle Arnold Burke. In today's episode, I'm sharing a recent conversation with Master Certified Life Coach Caryn Gillen, where we discussed business, leadership, and values. Welcome to the It's Your Time podcast, the podcast where busy professionals like you get the practical solutions and support you need to gain control of your schedule so you can strive to be the best in your career, but without the stress and overwhelm. If you're looking to increase your energy and decrease your stress, you are in the right place. Hello. Welcome back to the podcast, friends. How are you all doing? I have to tell you, I'm feeling pretty amazing. We had some days at the beach. I'm a bit burnt. You would think after this many years of life, I would know to put more sunscreen on, but we live and learn, right, friends? I hope you have been able to enjoy the last couple weeks and the start of summer. And today, I actually have a special treat for you because today I want to share a recent conversation that I had with Caryn Gillen. Now, Caryn is a Master Certified Life Coach who holds multiple certifications and a master's degree in counseling psychology. I told you I wanted to start bringing more powerful women on the podcast, and voila, here you go. Here is one for you today. In fact, Caryn's experience also includes commercial fishing, family business, project management, restaurant service management, and the hotel management side of small ship cruising. She is super multifaceted. Caryn loves and coaches two distinct groups of people. In fact, she mentors fellow life coaches who are moving into their identity as business leaders, and she's a mindset coach for founders and executives who have had all of the success that they initially dreamed of and now are asking, what's next? I worked with Caryn for a couple of years, and she really does exemplify the idea of doing the business you want to do. And I thought it was important to have her on because it's not just in regards to entrepreneurial business. It truly is how you show up in your sales career, running your territory, and making choices for your area. In this conversation, we did talk a bit about the entrepreneurial business, but also I wanted to make sure that we touched upon the idea of being in sales and how the themes can go across the lines. Really looking at running a territory is just like running a business. We also talked about what she means when she discusses the importance of slowing down in order to speed up. We discussed leadership qualities and embracing what that means for you. That is so important. What does leadership look like for you? We talked about establishing your value system and then using that as your filter for your decisions, not only in business, but also in life. And Caryn has these 4 pillars. And one of the pillars for Caryn's business has been to be in it for the long game. So we talked about what that means for your business as well. Now, as always, you know that I like to share as if you are just listening. So without further ado, enjoy the conversation. Okay, well, thank you so much for being here. This is going to be fun. This is like round 2. So why don't we just have you start by introducing yourself and kind of bringing everybody up to speed as to who you help and what you do and all the goodness.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me back. It's fun. So my business has a couple tracks. I coach and mentor coaches in the field that I love and the work that I love. And then I also work with founders and leaders doing one-on-one coaching, life coaching, thought partnering, crisis counseling, whatever you want to call it, doing all that.
Depending on the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. That's awesome. I know you've helped so many people, and I think that they're just so lucky. I'm a little biased perhaps, but I think that everybody is just so lucky. And I know one thing that really resonated with me with my work with you is your idea of owning like your own thought process around your business and having fun with it. And I think that can totally play into how we look at our sales districts or
Mm-hmm.
regions and how we set up our business. So can you maybe speak a little bit about that in the corporate setting and how you see like the need for us to kind of do us, right, as
Yeah.
salespeople, corporate leaders?
I think salespeople, because they're on commission most of the time, are the most entrepreneurial in any corporate role, maybe other than the people thinking about futures or the CEO, um, because you have so much power over your outcomes and your results, where other people do, but not so directly impacting their bottom line and their monthly or quarterly payouts.
Hmm.
So I think about having that owner mindset and showing up everywhere not like you own the place out of ego, but from, if I take full responsibility for this role and for the outcomes and for the process and for the customers or the clients, how can I show up and hold that space at an even smarter, better, higher level for everything that I want to create? And that is really based on who you are, what you value, how you like to be sold to, kind of your natural charisma, whatever that is, introverted or extroverted, like it doesn't matter. It's who you are and how you're going to show up to most authentically connect with your customers, because your customer doesn't want one kind of salesperson selling to them. They want people who are aligned with themselves, aligned with the work that they're doing, selling them things they believe in. And anybody can do that. And it can look like anything.
I think that is so important. And I think it's so important for young women who are starting out because this is truly still a male dominated industry. And I think sometimes we come into it. I know I did that. I thought I had to be professional and I have to do this and you have to kind of do it the way the guys do it, but it can be so much different. It can look so different.
Yeah, like we do.
Yeah.
But how
Good
long did it
point.
take you to get there? Like how long before you were like, okay, I'm going to do this my way?
Oh, literally. I mean, how long did we work together? So, what, 14 years it probably took me to get there. I do remember early on one of my managers saying, Shell, they need to see you as you, because I thought like
Mm-hmm.
there had to be this facade of being so professional. And what if they really saw me? They would see all the crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
that might be what could also be endearing to some folks.
Yeah. And it's really a catch. It's like, I have to be willing to be vulnerable enough to be seen by people and to be myself with people. And I have to be like, we also have this desire to just fill a role and kind of fade into the background so that we don't get called out, so that we don't get pointed at, so that we don't get like, she's different than the other people. So it's like, it's the thing we've been trained not to want, but it's the thing that works.
Yes. And I think as you're saying that, it also just came up in my mind, a lot of times through training, whether it's pharmaceutical sales or medical device sales, there's a lot of this is what you can say, this is what you cannot say. The FDA says you can say this. So I think that it's the training process also, but really the important little tweak to it is adding your special sauce, right?
Right. Which you don't get like for anybody who's new, like you don't get to the special sauce place until you really have that skeleton in your body of like, here's the basics. Here's why we say it this way. Here's why we don't say it that way. And once you have all of that like grounded in your body, then it's a lot easier to be flamboyant
Mhm.
with yourself.
That's a great point. That is, yeah, absolutely. Because I think knowing the foundational knowledge as you're speaking to is what helps to also start building the confidence, right? To be able to
Mm-hmm.
take that extra step.
Yep. The foundations, just like kid
Perfect.
sports. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Now, you had mentioned values, and you talk a lot about the importance of values in business, and we've gone through different exercises. Can you just speak a little to why you think that's so important? Because I don't think I thought about that before you introduced us to it at all. So I'm sure that there's a number of folks who don't even give themselves the time to really think about what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing about values is they're running your life, whether you know it or not. And having awareness of what they are can really shortcut heartache and decision making and just that little bit of self-awareness about why do I show up the way that I do? What is it that I'm honoring by showing up the way that I do? why did something feel so terrible? What value was I stepping on then? Or what value was being stepped on by somebody else? There's all these ways they show up in our lives. It can be in our work, in how we choose to prep our food, in the car we drive, in, it's everywhere. It's in our home. It's in our history. So if you haven't heard of values work before, I would just say, like, look back across your whole life, even school, and think about times where you got so frustrated, you were seething mad, and you didn't even really know why you were so mad. Maybe nobody else was as mad. And that was somewhere a value was getting stepped on that was probably fairly important to you. And on the flip side, anytime you felt like you were on cloud nine, you were completely elated, you couldn't believe how easily everything was working, life is just so amazing. Any of those times, it's probably a value that you hold dear was working for you. It was being used in a positive way. So that's a couple ways to find out what yours are. But when I think about using them in a work setting, it's really, we all come up against decisions that are hard to make because what will people think? Or what about the bottom line? Or what about my quarterly report? Or what about, all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And if we know that we have a value for commerce, which is a value, you can value money and sale, like that's perfectly fine, right? All of our values are different. They don't all look like, the wall in that fancy office you went to one time. But like, you have to let yourself have the values you have. And then when something comes up that's hard, check in with like, okay, like this happened for me just this week. I have one value for wholeheartedness. I have another value for connection and community. And I was like, why am I feeling so activated? It was because they were right up next to each other. And I was trying to solve a problem where I would honor one, but not the other. And so then it's like, oh, well, if I value wholeheartedness and connection, then in this instance, which one do I choose? And it just helps you sleep at night. It's like when I could get worked up, I could have more anxiety. I could think something's wrong with me, or I could notice, what am I actually doing here? I'm stepping on my own feet. And which foot do I want to stomp on today? Because it is my choice and there are no right answers. But if I'm going to live a values-led life, I got to pick one.
That's so good. And I know for an example that we worked on is the whole idea of caring, right? Like I want people to care. And so when you say, if you find yourself frustrated, an example at work would be if somebody didn't seem to respond fast enough to a patient or to a doctor. And then my immediate brain response, again, not fully knowing what it all meant, right, was like, well, they don't care. And so now I'm annoyed. But doing this work has been so enlightening to just step back and recognize, yeah, not everybody. And caring can be different to everybody too, right? What that means.
Yeah. Some people might have that value of like systems and processes, and they're always going to put that ahead of care. And that's how they care for people, but it's so different than how you would do it. Yeah.
Another area that is so different than how I normally do it that you help me with is the whole idea of slowing down in order to speed up. And I think there's a lot of high achievers who think, the busy badge of honor is what is to be had. So can you speak a little bit to that and why you think it is so important? And we're not talking necessarily like sit around and eat bonbons all day, right? But like, what does that mean and why is it so important in the corporate world, I guess, and in life, right?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that comes up is it's hard to be equitable if we're racing around, right? Like if you want to care for humans, then we have to slow down enough to be thoughtful about what we're doing and ask questions about why am I doing what I'm doing? But I also think it's just so uncomfortable to slow down because everybody around you would like to just fly through life so they don't have to sit down and catch up with their feelings or their inboxes or their whatever it is that they're trying to avoid. But yeah,
I'd rather the inbox than the feelings.
I know, so much easier. Delete. Yeah, but it's definitely saying yes to more intentional living and thinking further out than just today. So going really fast is usually being reactive. What's happening right now? What's the first problem in front of my face? Instead of thinking, how does what we're going to decide about this one thing impact us in 9 months, in 3 years? Right. And so it's a lot more work on the front end to go slow to speed up, but on the back end, you get to the speed up and things run smooth more often if you've been really intentional for a while.
Yeah, and I think that goes to like what is urgent versus what is important. And I know there are a lot of folks that, right, every something comes up and we want to be the one to take care of it. And so it's urgent, urgent, urgent. But then you look back and you're like, what happened? Nothing that I planned to do today is actually accomplished.
Right. And in the medical field more than anywhere else, probably that feels really true. Like a lot of times I'm working with life coaches and I say, we're not ER docs. We don't
Mm.
need to be on fire all the time. No one's going to die if you take an extra 24 hours to do something. But sometimes in your field, I'm sure it comes up even more.
Yeah, and I think there are still a lot of folks who would be like, hell no, I am not trying that. But just start small, right? Because you're
Right.
right, it is super uncomfortable. And you talk about that, the idea that discomfort is the lighthouse. Like, what do you mean when you say that?
I think if we are curious with our discomfort rather than judgmental, if we lean towards it rather than away from it, it can show us where our next growth edge is. So if it's really uncomfortable to slow down and to be intentional with our planning, and then after that, be intentional with how we don't react versus do react,
Mm.
it's going to be confronting, but it will teach you things about yourself.
That is so important. Again, just as an example, I remember when I was changing my morning routine and kind of slowing down and being more intentional with meditating or journaling. And I remember talking to you like, I just felt so tired and I felt so off and I felt so, but now I look back and I'm like, I get so much more done in the morning. Like it's so much better. But during that time frame, it did not feel good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It was not fun. And you talk about having fun a lot. So yes.
Yeah. But definitely with curiosity, it's like, if we want to make a change, we have to like let ourselves be beginners for a little while. We have to suck at it for a while. And
Mm.
that's actually a part of it.
That is so good to be willing, yeah, to suck at it because I think for so many folks, they just keep going and the busy is what has been rewarded for so many years that it
Mm-hmm.
definitely, it's almost like an identity shift of slowing down.
And there's so much more quick dopamine in being busy and getting the quick hit of like, just did that, just did that, just did that, right? Every time you do that, it's a little bit of a reward. Cross that off the list. But, the other thing's slower, like satisfaction or dopamine. What do you want?
Oh, that's so good. That's another podcast I have to do is about dopamine because I am definitely, I find, in the afternoons when I get my coffee and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get this done and this done and this done and this done. I'm like, take a breath.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you have a podcast, When I'm in Charge, That Will Be Different, which I am sure many of us have had the thought and still do probably daily at some level. So, where did you come up with that? And kind of what are your stories around having that as your podcast?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a values story and it goes back to my freshman year of high school, actually.
Oh, nice.
And I was on a basketball team and they didn't have a C team. It was JV freshman year. And there were like 26 of us at practice. And I don't know, you need 5 people to play basketball. So 26, we were way overhuman. And I would
And
lean
still only
back.
one ball.
Yeah, right. We didn't even really play. We just ran because it was too many people for the coach to coach. But yeah, I just had this moment like when I'm a coach, this is not how this is going to be. And I remember thinking like, I just had that thought. And then I shared it with a coach at one point and she was like, maybe that's the name of your podcast. When I'm in charge, that'll be different. So it came out of one of those times where I felt like one of my value for leadership was getting stepped on. Cause I was like, the school didn't allow the athletics department to have a C team. They didn't allow the coach to actually make cuts. And, the next year they lost a lot of players. I'm
Oh,
like, that
wow.
sucks. That sucks for these kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's such an interesting podcast. Everybody should take a listen because I feel like there's no one thing that like you have so many different topics that you talk about.
I know it's chaotic, in a good way.
Planned.
Planned
A
chaos.
slow
Yes.
planned chaotic. Yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned values again. Can you talk a little bit? I know you did an exercise with us, and I know you just gave folks like an idea of kind of what to look at for values, but can you just kind of share what you had us do in a short version, I guess, of finding out what those values are? Because I think for some people, like, I don't even know if I knew what the words would be for my values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I'll do one better because I know this resource exists. Brene Brown has a podcast and they did one on unlocking us. She and her sister went through the exercise, but they also gave a PDF that went with it.
Oh,
So I'll send you the link that you can put in the show notes so that if somebody wants something they can print out on the back, it has questions on the front, it has all these values listed on the back. You don't have to opt in for anything and they just give you the PDF, which is
nice.
really nice. So it's gives you the list so you can click through. I think what I like to do is look at the sheet of values that they give you and just cross out the no's, like definitely not, definitely not, definitely not. And then go through and ask like, which ones can I not live without? And then kind of circle those ones. And
Okay.
then just, and then what you have to do too, this is for me, like my value is connection. I thought it was community, but actually community lives under connection. It like catches that one. So you kind of have to look at, okay, I have a list of maybe 10 that I can't live without. Do any of those 10, does one live within the other?
Mm.
And then you can kind of cross one out because we get to define these ourselves. My definition of wholeheartedness as a value in my life is completely different than somebody else's, but the definition really only matters to me.
I think that's so important because I remember one of my values that I thought I should change because it didn't seem like was the working hard, right? Like I value
Right.
working hard, but then I also talk about so much of like trying to do more of what you love and not working so hard. But it really was this like back and forth, and so it really is. There's no right or wrong answer. It really
Right.
is what is true for you.
Right. And we can't judge what our values are. Like they are what they are. And if you try to avoid who you are, you're not doing anyone any favors. Like, so
Mm,
if your values are like, I think hard work is great. I actually love working hard, but it's where does it start getting in the way of my life versus adding to my life? Right. When am I
mm.
using it as I guess, a tool versus a weapon?
I love that question. Yeah, where does it get in the way of my life? That's such a great just take a moment and pause if you're
Yeah.
feeling burnt out, right? Like, okay,
Yeah.
where is the edge? What's coming over?
Hmm. Yeah.
S-
But the really good work to do. It also takes a little time. So I would do a first round and then put them on a sticky note, put them on your dashboard of your car. If you're driving a lot, put it on your bathroom mirror, your computer, whatever. And just notice like, does that feel right? Is that still true? Is there one that's more appropriate for me than that? And yeah, it takes time.
And I think it can even change, right? So like we did it,
Yeah.
I did it with you one year and then I did another year, and some were still the same, but some I must have evolved, I guess. I don't know, but things
There you go.
changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'll go with.
They do. And your self-awareness about yourself changes. And I'm imagining at different phases of our lives and age stages, we're going to value things differently. Like the amount of adventure I needed in my 20s, I don't have that at all anymore. I'm like, I love to be at my house.
I'm good.
Yeah.
That's so great. In keeping in the idea of values, you are big on the long game. And I think that probably is something that is part of the big umbrella of your values, I would guess. When you're
Mhm.
working with founders and leaders, like why do you think that's so important? And what are some tips that you think you would share with folks in leadership? And I consider leadership is like any position, right? In sales, you're a leader of yourself, you're a leader of your business. And what does that mean to you, the long
Mhm.
game?
So, when you go out in a little boat and it gets like rocky.
Is that like the 3 hour tour?
Exactly. And you have your Gilligan's hat on. But if you look at just the next choppy wave in front of you, you're probably going to fall out of the boat. But if you look beyond all of the chop at the horizon, you will stay in the boat and you will stay upright. And the long game is that, I think, for our emotional experience of our lives. Like we're going to feel that the earth is moving under our feet, but we're not going to fall out because we're there to react and respond with the long game and our values in mind. So no matter what happens today, I know where I'm going. This is again that slow down to speed up thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's all related.
There's a method to this madness of yours.
There is. Yeah. And I think living your life in a way where you're not having to constantly react to your own too quick decision making is so much more comfortable. But
Mm,
if you're in the mode of react, and you have to kind of like slow that down, come to a stop, ground yourself, gather yourself, and then start thinking about that. Like, okay, well, what about a month from now? Like what about the end of next week? And then once you feel like I've got this, like I can operate a few weeks at a time, try a month, and then I'm going to operate a quarter ahead. Like, I don't want my quarterly sales goals to be the issue this quarter. I want to be worried about next quarter, this quarter. And then 3 quarters from now, right now, what am I doing in terms of relationship with the doctors and in terms of responding to patient care, any of that stuff right now that will impact my sales a year and a half from now? How am I
mm.
showing up to support myself today, my future self tomorrow, my future self a year from now?
That is so important because I think, you hear things like you go from hero to zero, like one quarter to the next, and what have you done for me
Right.
now? Right. But if you kind of switch that mindset and look bigger, then it's not such. I remember one of the first women in sales that ever gave me advice because I was so like up and down, crying one sale and then, thrilled the next. And she's like, Michelle, you can never let yourself get too high or too low. And that's kind of the same idea,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you have to ride it out.
Yeah. Because it
And
is
it's like,
volatile, right? Like if you look
yeah.
at week to week income versus quarter to quarter, good God, you're going to have whiplash.
Oh my gosh, yeah, especially yeah, with commission sales. It's crazy. And
Yeah.
that was even something that we worked on, right? Because so often in life coaching, they kind of look at your monthly income or whatever, and ours is so different with commission at the
Yeah.
end of the quarter, and it's just
Yeah.
important to look far out. Yeah.
And if you're a coach who's listening, I have pretty much stopped saying, look at your monthly. It's look
Mhm.
at quarterly as well, because you can have $100,000 month and then a $4,000 month or a 0 month, right? It's the same big jumps happen for us too.
Yeah, and that's so important because I think when you do have the high, right, and then you allow that money number to give you the low, then how are you showing up in your actions when you're feeling like, oh my God, I can't figure this out?
Right. So, yeah, like if we're all inevitable, we're going to happen to the world no matter what. How do we want to show up no matter what?
That's like a tweetable thing there. I'm not on Twitter, but Instagram, we're all
Right.
inevitable.
Yeah, we are.
I
We're
love it.
here.
Yes. And I also just want to make a side note to your I don't know what exactly the word would be, but the fact that you use the boat as the analogy, you have some backing as to why that's important, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a little boating experience. I understand what it's like to only look one wave ahead. You're always going to get sick.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't get sick. Oh, this
Hmm.
has been so much fun. Have we missed anything? I have some questions at the end, and I'll be sure to put links in. But is there anything that we haven't talked about that's important that you want to make sure you say here?
I guess the other thing that's really important for all of us who are working with customers is like, and who do our own sales, it's like, what is the reason you do it really? I think if we're really focused on the numbers and hitting marks and, counts and all that stuff, it's like, but if I really just think about the people and how this helps the people, and I put care ahead of counting, and when you're thinking about values too, if you choose to value the patient, the client, the customer on the other end first and take them into account first, what is the best thing for them? What do they need to know to make the right decision for themselves? Then you're always going to feel better about any sale. And I think so are they.
Yes, and I think that's so important because we were just having a conversation. We recently launched a new indication, and there's all these data points about the competition and what, but at the end of the day, the patient is not a data point. And that's what we were
Right.
saying. Like these patients have lifestyles that they have to live, and how is it that we are helping them? And that's what I try to tell folks that I work with. There's the number you have to get, the number you have to get. But if you just stop and think about like when you talk to that doctor, you're making a difference in the life of that patient. It's not
Mhm.
just getting that message out.
Yeah. The doctor is just actually the roadblock to get the help out there, right? Sometimes.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And I think when you think about that person, the patient more often, for example, you're willing to maybe do things that might be more uncomfortable that you wouldn't
Mhm.
normally be willing to do because it's something that you know you're making a difference versus just a number.
Yeah, and I like what Gary Vaynerchuk says about doing the unscalable. Like, put yourself out there for each one of those clients in an unscalable way, not in the way that every single time you can do it this way, but be willing to kind of be ridiculous in how you take care of people, because those are the doctors and those are the patients who are going to remember you and talk about whatever and get your name out there in maybe a different way.
Oh, I love that. Be ridiculous.
Be
That's up my
ridiculous.
that's up my alley.
Yeah.
Crazy Aunt Michelle. Oh, that's so good. Thank you. Now, you always end your podcast with some fun fire questions. So I just want to turn it on you before we close out here. So, what is one thing that you will not travel without?
I usually bring a book, even though I don't often open it. So I'm going to say my earbuds or my AirPods, because I'm always listening to books and podcasts when I'm traveling, zoning out
Mm,
on the plane. Can't travel without those.
okay, that's a good one. And you also talk about your time in the restaurant business. And
Mhm.
what is one amazing experience that you recently had in the restaurant?
That's fun. Um, yeah, these are hard. That's good.
Yeah, like, who came up with these questions?
Yeah. I think a recent, because we had a pandemic still technically happening, right? I went to a restaurant for after a couple years, and I hadn't had an oyster on the half shell in a really long time. And this one restaurant, Marche, locally, has really good oysters and really good French fries. And so I went there and I had those with a friend, and it was just a really like we're getting back to some normal life, and that felt really good.
Yeah, that is a good one. And I think the great thing about all of your discussions around the restaurant business is right back to what you were just saying, treating the customer and having the experience and the
Mhm.
atmosphere and the overall like fun time that you have there.
Yeah.
So important. Now, you've talked a lot today about connecting, and I know that's for sure something that I see you do like, oh my gosh, heads and shoulders above so many people. How do you do it for your local community?
Ooh, I love this question. So I worked with a coach. I'm still working with her, actually, Trudy LeBron. And she, after George Floyd was murdered, and I did all this work. And one of the questions she asked that always sticks with me is, what can you do for Black and Brown folks where you live? Right? Because there's these huge global problems, but what can you do where you live? So, because it was a pandemic and I wasn't getting out in the world very much, what I do is I give to my local food bank. I joined the local NAACP. And as of today, I started my monthly contribution to Planned Parenthood of Southwest Oregon, because that is an important thing to consider here in Oregon, where we will continue to offer abortions to people who want them.
And again, it's in line with so many of your values, I would imagine.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And the last one, which I love also, is what is one myth that you let people keep about yourself?
That one's hard. I see why I put all these people on the spot now.
I know they always say, "Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's a good one."
Yeah. Um, I think it's about my energy level. Like, I am an extrovert, but I'm also a hermit. Like, I'm not all energy all the time. And I spend a lot of time in
Harmony.
recovery and hermiting up in my house and having alone time. So I think people think maybe I'm out there a little more than I am.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I think I'm super introverted too. And I think folks might think I'm more extroverted, but I'm with
Hmm.
you. I'm at home on the
Hmm.
patio with a pup. It's
With the
good.
dog.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Just chilling.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been so great. So I will put your links in there. Where can people find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Caryn Gillen, Instagram, or I have my newsletter list or my website. But because of my oddly spelled name, I have Caryn Gillen everywhere and anywhere.
Okay, perfect. And I will. And
Yeah.
I would suggest for anyone to get on because those weekly emails have such amazing nuggets. And again, it's not just for life coaching, it's for founders and leaders and
Yeah.
life.
It's really kind of whatever's up lately. It's not very life coachy, but it's so life coachy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time here.
And thanks for having me back. It was really good to see you and be here. And thanks for the time.
Absolutely. Okay, so many gems, right? Caryn has such a calming energy. And one thing I didn't mention earlier was what a wizard she is at asking questions. She really makes you think about your life and what it is that you want, which I am all about. And I think for so many women, it's really a challenging question when you're asked, what do you want? Because for so many years, we've been socialized to do everything for everyone else. So I think asking what it is that you want is one of the most important things that you can consider in order to be the best, not only for you, but in fact for those around you. Now, Caryn offers a free bit of insight. Now, if you are interested in learning more about what Caryn offers, I would highly suggest signing up for her 30 days of questions. And you can sign up in the link in the notes. They really do make you think for sure. Her questions will make you stop and think. And I also will be including the link to her course in the notes, and you can find her at caryngillen.com. Be sure to check her out. I'll include her podcast that we mentioned in the interview as well in the notes. All right, friends, that's what I have for you today. Let's circle back next week. But for now, make it a great day. Take care. Did you know you can take this work to a deeper level with me one-on-one? Go to michelleburkecoaching.com and click on Get Started to begin.